They spent their last savings buying an abandoned storage unit filled with old junk. But as they started clearing the mess, they found something hidden beneath the concrete floor, something that was never meant to be discovered. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching this from. The morning light of Atlanta crept across the cracked blinds, drawing pale lines across the brothers' worn-out kitchen table. Jaden Harper sat with his elbows resting on the surface, staring at the pile of bills spread before him like an enemy formation. The papers smelled faintly of oil and sweat, reminders of a life lived in constant motion, of hours spent in underground garages fixing engines that never truly belonged to him. His brother, Malik, entered quietly, still in the same faded security uniform from his night shift, the word patrol barely visible across the chest pocket. He carried 2 paper cups of gas station coffee, setting one in front of Jaden before sinking into the opposite chair with a sigh that seemed older than his 30 years. Their apartment was small, a single-story rental in a part of West Atlanta where the pavement cracked like old paint and stray dogs wandered through empty lots. The walls carried the smell of fried food from neighbors they barely knew, and the hum of a broken refrigerator filled the silences between them. It had been years since either of them talked about dreams. Dreams didn't pay the rent or fix the plumbing or keep the lights from flickering every time the dryer ran. Their father, Henry Harper, had once built a modest life around his small auto repair shop. People used to come from across the city because Henry had a gift. He could tell what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it. But then came the fire, the insurance fight, the debt. Now he was in a nursing home outside the city, his hands trembling from arthritis, his voice shaky from age. Malik and Jaden visited when they could, though guilt always followed them out the door afterward, like a ghost they could never leave behind. The letter from their landlord lay between the bills, a final notice typed in polite but merciless language. 3 days to pay or vacate. The total owed $1,200. Jaden rubbed his forehead and laughed bitterly. "We don't even have half of that," he muttered. Malik reached into his pocket and laid down a thin stack of folded bills. It wasn't much. $400 even, he said, plus change. Jaden looked at it, at the faded green paper that represented the last of their safety, and something inside him hardened. He wanted to curse, to throw the bills across the table and watch them scatter like leaves. But Malik's expression stopped him. His brother wasn't angry. He just looked tired. There was something in his eyes. That same quiet determination he'd carried since their mother died. Malik had been 20 when the stroke took her, and Jaden had watched him change overnight from an easygoing dreamer into the kind of man who measured every move, every word, every risk. "Listen," Malik began, his voice low. "There's something I heard about at work. One of the warehouse guys, he said people make money at these storage auctions, the places where they sell off abandoned units." Jaden frowned. "You mean the shows? Those are scams." Malik shook his head. "Not all of them. He said his cousin bought one last month, found some old sports memorabilia, made $2,000 flipping it online. It's a gamble, but..." He paused, meeting Jaden's eyes. "It's something." Jaden leaned back, exhaling through his teeth. The idea sounded absurd, a desperate gamble dressed up as hope. But then again, what did they have left to lose? He could hear the rain starting outside, the steady patter against the cracked window glass. Somewhere in the building, someone was yelling at a child. Life here always felt one bad week away from collapse. The next morning, they drove across the city in Jaden's old Ford pickup. The transmission whined on every turn, and the air conditioner gave up halfway down the interstate. They didn't talk much on the drive. The highway stretched ahead, gray and endless, until the concrete gave way to dusty lots and low industrial buildings. A faded sign reading, "Metro Self-Storage Public Auction Today," hung crookedly over the entrance gate. The parking area was already crowded. Men in baseball caps and women with clipboards stood in groups, comparing notes, flashing wads of cash like poker players showing confidence. The smell of hot asphalt and diesel hung thick in the air. Jaden parked near the fence, eyeing the other bidders, a mix of professionals and drifters, people who knew exactly what they were doing and those who had nowhere else to go. A man with a microphone and a sunburned neck barked out instructions. The auction moved fast. Each metal door was rolled up just enough for the crowd to peek inside. A quick glimpse of the chaos within. Furniture, boxes, forgotten lives packed into shadows. Bidders called out numbers in a strange rhythm, and the auctioneer's chant rolled like machinery, efficient and merciless. The Harpers stayed back at first, watching. Jaden tried to read the veterans, how they scanned each space in seconds, spotting signs of value others missed. They moved like hunters, patient and precise. Mullock whispered, "We need something that looks ignored, something nobody else wants." Jaden almost laughed. That described their entire life. Unit after unit sold, some for 100, others for thousands. The sun climbed higher, baking the asphalt. Sweat soaked through Jaden's shirt. When the auctioneer reached the last row, the crowd's energy began to fade. That's when they stopped at Unit 82. The door screeched upward, and a breath of stale air drifted out. The space looked pathetic. Gray concrete, a few broken shelves, some rusty tools, an overturned bucket. A couple of bidders glanced inside, snorted, and walked away. The auctioneer looked disappointed, but called for bids anyway. Silence. "Do I hear 100?" he said. Nothing. 75? Still nothing. Jaden was about to turn away when Mullock's voice cut through the stillness. 320. Heads turned. The auctioneer blinked, shrugged. 320 once, twice. The hammer fell against the clipboard with a flat clap. "Sold to the gentleman in the blue jacket." Jaden stared at his brother, stunned. Mullock grinned faintly. "It's just money," he said. "We've lost it before." By the time they signed the papers and got the keys, the crowd had mostly dispersed. The brothers stood in front of the open unit, their own private tomb of someone else's leftovers. Dust floated in the sunlight like lazy insects. Jaden kicked at a can, sending it skittering into the shadows. "You sure this wasn't a mistake?" he asked. Mullock didn't answer. He was crouching near the back wall, studying the floor, the corners, the way the light hit the concrete. He didn't know why, but something about the place felt different. They spent the afternoon hauling out the obvious junk: rusted shelves, boxes of old magazines, a busted chair. Each sound echoed off the metal walls, hollow and lonely. By evening, they were sweaty, exhausted, and no closer to finding anything valuable. Mullock sat on the tailgate of the truck, sipping warm water from a plastic bottle. "You ever think maybe we're cursed?" he asked. Jaden smirked. "Nah, just unlucky." The sun dipped low, turning the lot gold and orange. The air smelled of hot metal and dust. As they locked up for the night, Mullock's eyes lingered on the faint hairline crack that ran across the back section of the floor. He made a note to check it again tomorrow. Driving home through the city, the brothers said little. The streets shimmered in the heat, and the skyline looked distant, like another world entirely. Jaden felt a dull ache in his chest. not from failure, but from something heavier, the weight of years spent trying to outrun their circumstances. Malik, though, kept his gaze fixed ahead, his mind turning. Later that night, as Jaden sat counting the few bills they had left, Malik stood at the window, watching the streetlights flicker over the wet asphalt. "It's not over yet," he said quietly. "That box, I don't know why, but it feels like there's something there. Something we missed." Jaden didn't respond. He was too tired to argue, too worn out to dream. But as the hum of the refrigerator filled the silence once more, even he couldn't shake the faint pull of possibility, a whisper at the back of his mind, telling him that maybe, just maybe, luck had decided to turn in their direction after all. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the skyline. The air pressed heavy against the glass, the promise of another storm on the horizon. And though neither of them knew it yet, the decision Malik had made that morning to raise his hand, to spend their last $300 on a forgotten storage unit, would drag them into a chain of discoveries and dangers neither brother could have imagined. That night, as the city cooled under the rain and the streets gleamed like sheets of black glass, the Harpers slept restlessly, haunted by the sound of metal rolling upward and the empty echo of that gray concrete room. Something waited beneath that floor, patient and buried, and by the time they uncovered it, their lives would no longer belong to them alone. The next morning broke gray and damp, the sky over Atlanta swollen with low clouds that seemed to press the air down toward the ground. Jaden woke first, his back aching from the worn-out couch, and sat up to find Malik already dressed, standing by the door with his keys in hand. The excitement in his brother's posture was unmistakable, though he tried to hide it under a calm expression. "You comin'?" he asked, and Jaden rubbed his face, groaning. "We lost enough time on that junk yesterday." Malik shook his head slowly. "We didn't look close enough." By the time they reached the storage lot, the asphalt was slick with rain. Puddles reflected the dull metal doors of the units, and the air smelled faintly of rust. Malik walked ahead, unlocking the padlock on Unit 82. The door groaned as it rolled upward, revealing the same gray emptiness, the same cracked shelves and piles of refuse that had mocked them the day before. Jaden leaned against the truck, folding his arms. "I don't know what you expect to find in there," he said. Malik didn't answer. He stepped inside, his boots echoing softly against the floor. For the next few hours, they worked in silence. Malik cleared out the remaining debris. Broken tools, paint cans with hardened contents, a stack of waterlogged magazines from the early '80s. Jaden sorted through boxes filled with rusted bolts and shattered glass, pausing every so often to curse under his breath. They filled trash bags until the truck bed was half full. Nothing they found had even a hint of value, but the feeling wouldn't leave Malik. It wasn't just curiosity now, it was something stronger, an instinct pressing on the edge of his thoughts. Every few minutes, his eyes went back to the back wall, to that small patch of concrete near the corner where the color didn't match. When the light shifted through the doorway, the surface looked almost new compared to the rest of the floor. As the afternoon wore on, Jaden wiped sweat from his brow and dropped into the old office chair they'd found. "We should cut our losses," he said. "Take what little we can sell for scrap and move on." Malik crouched near the wall again, running his fingers over the faint line that separated the old concrete from the newer section. "Doesn't this look strange to you?" he asked. Jaden sighed, pulling a wrench from his pocket. Everything in this place looks strange. But Malik's voice had that quiet insistence that always made Jaden stop. He fetched a hammer and chisel from the truck. The metal clanged sharply as he chipped away at the floor, sending thin shards of concrete scattering across the surface. Malik knelt beside him, holding a flashlight low to the ground. The sound echoed inside the metal walls, a rhythmic thud that grew faster with every strike. After a few minutes, the hammer hit something that rang hollow. Jayden froze. Malik leaned closer, shining the light. Beneath the fractured cement, a dull gray plate glimmered through the dust. They cleared the edges, revealing a square of metal, about 2 feet across, bolted into the floor. Jayden's heart began to pound. "What the hell is this doing here?" he murmured. The bolts were rusted but intact. Malik retrieved a socket wrench from the pile of old tools. It took effort. Each bolt squealed and resisted, but eventually one came loose, then another. The air beneath the plate was cool when they pried it up, the smell of earth and old metal drifting out. Below the opening was a dark void, no deeper than a few feet. Malik lowered his flashlight into it, revealing a space lined with wood and metal supports, like a buried compartment. Inside were several objects wrapped in heavy plastic. The brothers exchanged a look. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Jayden asked quietly. Malik nodded. They climbed down carefully, boots crunching on a thin layer of dust. The space was dry, surprisingly well preserved, as if sealed intentionally. Malik reached for the nearest package and peeled back the plastic. Inside were thick folders bound with faded labels. The words stamped on the covers made Jayden's stomach tighten. Project Horizon, property of U.S. government. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain tapped against the roof above, muffled by layers of metal and concrete. Jayden opened one of the folders and flipped through a stack of documents covered in technical schematics and typed reports. Most of it was jargon, engineering language he didn't understand, but one phrase stood out again and again. Containment protocol failure. Malik pulled out another object, a small suitcase with a broken handle. Inside it were old videotapes, several labeled with dates from the early 1970s. A separate envelope contained reels of magnetic tape, the kind used for government recordings. At the bottom of the suitcase lay a tarnished identification badge. The name printed on it read Arthur L. Lamb, Senior Engineer, Clayton Defense Systems. Jayden exhaled slowly. "This can't be real," he whispered. Malik held up one of the tapes, turning it over in his hand. The label read Horizon Test Footage, 1971. The brothers exchanged a glance that was equal parts awe and fear. They both understood what they were looking at. Something hidden, something that had been meant to stay buried. Jayden's first instinct was to put everything back and seal the floor again. "This is government stuff," he said. "We're not supposed to have this." Malik frowned. "You think they even remember this exists? Look at this place. It's been abandoned for decades. Whoever left this wanted it hidden, not recovered." Still, Jayden hesitated. And maybe they had a damn good reason. Malik shot him a look, tired and determined. Or maybe it's something people should have known about. They stood in the silence of that hidden space, their flashlights casting long shadows over the relics of another era. There was no gold, no treasure, no jackpot waiting to solve their financial ruin, only the weight of something far stranger, something dangerous precisely because it wasn't meant for them. When they emerged, the rain had stopped, the sky hung low and colorless, and the air smelled of wet metal. Malik loaded the suitcase and folders into the truck, careful to wrap them in a tarp. Jayden closed the unit and locked it, glancing around the lot. The place was deserted, but he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. On the drive home, the brothers didn't talk much. The truck rattled along the cracked highway, the suitcase resting between them on the seat like a third passenger. Jaden's hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly. Every so often, he checked the rearview mirror. The road behind them was empty except for the reflection of a pair of headlights that seemed to linger a little too long before fading away. Back in their apartment, they cleared the kitchen table again, pushing aside the unpaid bills to make room for the contents of the suitcase. Malek's excitement had settled into quiet focus. He moved methodically, inspecting each tape, each folder, as though assembling a puzzle. Jaden watched in silence, feeling the pull between fear and curiosity. He picked up one of the documents and read the first few lines. It was a report dated May 12, 1972, describing groundwater contamination near an experimental disposal facility in Georgia. Several words were blacked out with ink, but others remained visible. Toxic runoff, containment breach, relocation of waste to secondary chamber. Jaden swallowed hard. "This is bad news," he said. "This looks like they were burying chemicals, illegal stuff." Malek leaned closer, his brow furrowing. "Or worse, look at this." He held up another page, a map with coordinates, a shaded area labeled Site 12B Restricted Zone. There was also a list of contractors, one of them being Clayton Defense Systems. "That company doesn't even exist anymore," Malek said. The apartment grew quiet. Outside, the rain started again, tapping lightly on the window pane. Jaden leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "You realize we can't keep this," he said finally. "We'll get in trouble. The government doesn't lose track of classified stuff." Malek looked up. "You think they care about a few boxes left in a dead man's storage unit? No, they forgot. And if there's truth in here, if people got sick, if they covered something up, we should know." Jaden wanted to argue, but he couldn't. Part of him was already wondering what was on those tapes, what kind of images were sealed away for 50 years. He felt like they had stepped onto a path that couldn't be reversed. Later that night, after Malek fell asleep, Jaden sat alone at the table. He stared at the metal suitcase under the lamplight. The faint hum of the refrigerator filled the silence again, steady and constant. The floorboards creaked with the passing of the wind outside. He told himself to lock the suitcase away, to forget they'd ever found it. Yet his fingers brushed the edge of one of the tapes, the label almost worn smooth with time. The words Horizon Test Footage gleamed faintly beneath the light. Somewhere deep inside, a part of him already knew they wouldn't stop. Whatever they had uncovered beneath that concrete floor was no accident. It was a message from the past, a secret waiting to be unearthed, and whether it brought fortune or ruin didn't matter anymore. They were already part of it. As the clock neared midnight, Jaden rose, turned off the light, and stood at the window, looking out at the empty street. A pair of headlights moved slowly at the far end of the block, then turned and vanished. He felt a chill run through him, but when he looked back at the suitcase, it seemed to glow faintly in the dark, as though it were alive, humming with everything they didn't yet understand. By morning, the decision would be made, though neither of them would speak it aloud. They would dig deeper, they would watch the tapes. And by doing so, the brothers Harper would step beyond the simple world of rust, sweat, and debt into a hidden layer of history, one that had been waiting half a century to be found. The rain had stopped by dawn, leaving behind a pale mist that clung to the cracked sidewalks and power lines outside the Harpers' apartment. The air felt heavy, as though the city itself held its breath. Inside, the brothers sat at the table, the suitcase open between them. Its contents had taken on a strange power overnight, transforming from mere objects into something else, something that didn't belong in the world they knew. Jaden poured himself coffee that had gone cold hours ago, the bitter smell filling the kitchen, while Malika unspooled one of the film reels just enough to see the faded frames glimmering in the weak light. They hadn't slept much. Every time one of them closed his eyes, images came unbidden, the hollow sound of the hammer striking concrete, the cold breath of air rising from beneath the floor, the black letters stamped on the folders, Project Horizon. The phrase looped through their thoughts like a pulse. Jaden finally broke the silence. "We're not keeping this, Malik. We're not those guys on the internet who think they can play detective and end up in jail." Malik didn't look up. "We're not those guys, but if someone buried this, maybe it's because what's on those tapes could bury them." The tension between them grew as the morning light deepened. Jaden wanted to believe his brother was wrong, that this was nothing more than forgotten junk from an old military contractor. But curiosity worked like rust. It spread quietly, eroding caution until only impulse remained. When Malik suggested they play one of the tapes, Jaden didn't protest. He told himself he wanted to prove there was nothing to find. They borrowed a dusty old VHS player from their neighbor, a retired truck driver named Lonnie who hoarded electronics. He didn't ask questions when Malik mentioned it was for some old footage, just handed it over with a warning that the tracking might be bad. Back in the apartment, they connected it to their aging television, the screen flickering alive with static. Malik inserted the first tape. The label, written in smudged black ink, read Horizon Test Footage, January 1971. A low hiss filled the room, then an image appeared, grainy, distorted, but unmistakably real. The frame showed a barren stretch of desert under a washed-out sky. Men in white protective suits moved around a cluster of metallic containers, their movements hurried but methodical. In the corner of the screen, a timestamp blinked. January 19th, 71. For several minutes, the brothers watched in silence. The camera panned across vehicles bearing the logo of Clayton Defense Systems, the same name they'd seen on the documents. Then came the sound. Low mechanical hums, a voice over an intercom issuing instructions in clipped tones. The men opened one of the containers, revealing a cylindrical object sealed with multiple warning labels, radiation symbols, biohazard signs. Jaden leaned forward. "Jesus, this looks like a nuke site." Malik shook his head slowly. "No, something else." The footage jumped suddenly, lines of static streaking across the screen, then resumed inside a dimly lit structure. Rows of equipment blinked in the darkness. The camera focused on a series of canisters submerged in murky water, the surface rippling as if disturbed from below. A faint alarm sounded. Then, abruptly, the video cut off. The screen went black, leaving only the soft hiss of static and the faint echo of that alarm ringing in their ears. Jaden ejected the tape, his hands trembling. "We shouldn't have watched that." Malik stared at the black screen. "Now we know why it was buried." They sat in silence again, both trying to process what they'd seen. It wasn't just the strangeness of the footage, it was the feeling behind it, the sense that whoever filmed it had been documenting something forbidden. Jaden rubbed his temples. "This could get us killed," he muttered. Malik nodded, though there was no fear in his eyes, only a quiet resolve. Then maybe it's already too late. Later that afternoon, Malik spread the documents across the table, sorting them by date. Some were partially burned, others water-damaged, but enough remained legible to form a picture. The name Horizon appeared again and again, tied to phrases like containment breach, groundwater exposure, and civilian contamination risk. There were also letters, internal memos marked confidential, between a man named Arthur Lamb and government officials, arguing over funding and safety violations. One memo read, Site 12B must remain sealed until the secondary purge is complete. Public exposure could result in irreparable consequences. Jaden ran a hand over the page. 12B, that's the number from the map. Malik nodded. Yeah, the one near the floodplain south of the city. They exchanged a glance. Jaden didn't need to ask what his brother was thinking. Malik had always been the one to push forward, to keep digging even when common sense said stop. Don't even say it, Jaden said. We're not going out there. Malik folded the map carefully, his expression unreadable. Then what? Pretend we didn't see any of this? We could go to the papers, sure, but without proof, they'll laugh us out of the room. The only way to prove it's real is to find that site. Jaden looked away, the muscles in his jaw tightening. He wanted to shout, to call the idea insane, but something deep down whispered that Malik was right. Every instinct told him to walk away, yet curiosity, that corrosive force, had already eaten through the thin wall of reason he had left. They didn't decide that night, not in words. But the decision formed silently between them, heavy as the air that clung to the walls. The next day, Malik noticed something that froze the blood in his veins. When he stepped outside to smoke, a black SUV sat idling across the street. Its windows were tinted, its license plate blank with temporary tags. He pretended not to notice and went back inside. Jay, he said quietly, someone's watching. Jaden joined him at the window. The SUV drove off after a few minutes, turning the corner without haste. Probably just a coincidence, Jaden said, but neither of them believed it. That night, they hid the suitcase under the floorboard in their bedroom. Jaden backed up the tapes and documents onto his laptop, then onto a flash drive, encrypting the files as best he could. When he checked the computer again the next morning, the files were gone. Every folder was empty, wiped clean. He cursed, slamming the lid shut. It's not possible. I had a password. Malik's face hardened. Someone's inside already. They didn't go to work that day. Instead, they packed what remained, the physical evidence, and drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. The room smelled of bleach and cigarettes. Jaden sat on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, while Malik paced. We can't stay here long, Malik said. Whoever's watching us knows what we have. The television in the room played muted news reports. A headline scrolled across the bottom. Industrial pollution in southern Georgia under investigation. Malik stared at it for a long time. You see this? It's starting already. Someone's covering tracks. Jaden looked up. You think this is connected? I think everything's connected, Malik said. As night fell, Malik's mind raced with possibilities. He could contact a journalist, someone known for exposing government scandals. Maybe they could leak the footage anonymously. But even as he said it aloud, Jaden shook his head. If we go to the wrong person, we're dead. The fear between them became a living thing, pacing the room with them. Every noise outside made them flinch. Every car that slowed near the motel made their hearts stop. Jaden's dreams that night were filled with the images from the tape. Men in white suits, canisters shaken beneath the water, the red flash of warning lights. When he woke, Malik was sitting in the chair by the window, staring out into the dark. "You hear that?" he whispered. Jaden listened. Somewhere outside, an engine idled softly, steady and patient. By morning, the SUV was gone, but the unease remained. Malik insisted they couldn't turn back. "We need to know what happened at Site 12B," he said. "We need to see what they buried." Jaden wanted to refuse, but when he looked at his brother, saw the fire in his eyes, the stubborn courage that had carried them through every hardship, he knew resistance was pointless. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Malik copied the remaining tapes onto a portable drive, sealed the documents in waterproof bags, and mapped a route to the coordinates from the files. Jaden fueled up the truck, checking the rearview mirror every few minutes. The sense of being followed lingered like static in the air. Before they left, Malik made one final note in his phone. "If something happens to us, the truth is in Unit 82. He didn't tell Jaden. Some secrets, even between brothers, had to stay quiet for safety. That night, they left the city. The highway unspooled before them, lit by the glow of their headlights and the occasional passing truck. The world outside the windows grew emptier mile by mile. Warehouses given way to fields, billboards replaced by silence. Malik kept the map spread across his knees, tracing the faded line toward a blank space labeled only as 12B. They didn't speak again until the city lights were far behind. Jaden finally said, "If this goes bad, we walk away. Promise me." Malik nodded. "We'll walk away," he said, though both of them knew it was a lie. The road curved into darkness, swallowed by the trees. Somewhere ahead, hidden beneath decades of dirt and secrecy, lay the answer to everything they had seen on those tapes. They had crossed the line now, stepped beyond curiosity into obsession. And as the rain began again, soft and relentless, the Harpers drove on towards the shadow of something that had been waiting for them since the day Arthur Lamb decided to bury the truth under concrete. The highway grew narrower as they left the outskirts of Atlanta behind, cutting through long stretches of pine forest and low wetlands that shimmered under the dim morning sun. The brothers had driven for hours in silence, the rumble of the truck filling the space between them. Malik sat with the folded map on his lap, eyes scanning the faded lines that marked the way toward the coordinates they had found in the documents. Jaden kept his hands tight on the wheel, his gaze fixed ahead, as if afraid that if he blinked, they would disappear into the road itself. The map had led them farther south than either of them expected, into an area that seemed almost forgotten, where the road signs rusted unreadable and the air smelled faintly of swamp and gasoline. They stopped at a gas station on the edge of a small town that looked like it had been abandoned decades ago. A single pump still worked, its faded numbers clicking slowly as Jaden filled the tank. Malik went inside to buy coffee and ask for directions, but the old man behind the counter just looked at him blankly when he mentioned the road that led to the industrial district. "Ain't much out that way," he said, his voice slow and cracked with age. "Used to be plants there, long time ago. Folks left after the floods." Malik asked if anyone still went there. The man's eyes drifted toward the window, where the pine trees swayed in the damp wind. Not unless they have to. When they pulled back onto the road, the clouds hung low and gray. The light filtered through them like smoke. The further they drove, the more desolate it became. Fields giving way to marsh, marsh turning into empty industrial ruins. Rusted fences lined the road, and half-buried signs warned of contamination, though the paint had peeled so badly that the words were nearly illegible. It was the kind of place that had slipped through time's fingers, a stretch of forgotten land where nothing good ever happened. Malik checked the coordinates again. "Half a mile more," he said. "Turn right at the fork." Jaden slowed as the truck rolled over cracked pavement. The road curved sharply and ended at a chain-link gate that hung crookedly from one hinge. A faded government seal still clung to the metal, cracked down the middle. Beyond it lay rows of collapsed warehouses and flooded lots, their surfaces glinting under the pale light. Malik's pulse quickened. "This is it," he said quietly. They parked and climbed out. The silence here was suffocating. No birds, no insects, no wind. Just the distant drip of water somewhere in the ruins. Jaden adjusted his jacket and scanned the surroundings. "You sure this is safe?" Malik gave a half smile. "Safe's not really the point anymore, is it?" He grabbed the camera from the seat and started recording. "If this place was buried in those reports, we need proof." They stepped through the gate, boots crunching on gravel. Every building they passed looked the same. Windows shattered, roofs caved in, walls overgrown with ivy and mold. Graffiti covered the concrete, but most of it had faded to unreadable smears. They crossed a wide yard where the remnants of heavy machinery lay half-submerged in stagnant water. The smell was sharp, chemical, like something that should have dissipated years ago but hadn't. Jaden coughed. "Smells like a goddamn refinery." Malik pointed to a rusted sign jutting from the mud. The lettering was almost gone, but enough remained to make out the word Horizon. The realization hit them both at once. "It's real," Jaden murmured. Malik kept the camera steady, filming every detail, the sign, the debris, the decaying structures. When they reached the largest warehouse, Malik pushed the heavy metal door open just enough for them to squeeze through. Inside, darkness swallowed them whole. The air was cooler, dense with the scent of oil and damp concrete. Shafts of light pierced through holes in the roof, illuminating drifting motes of dust. They moved deeper inside, their flashlights sweeping over rusted pipes and machinery coated with grime. The floor sloped downward, leading to what had once been a loading bay. Malik spotted a staircase that descended into the ground. The steps were slick, the railing corroded. "There," he whispered. "That's where they stored the waste." Jaden hesitated. "You don't know that." Malik gestured toward the wall where a faded warning sign read, "Authorized personnel only." "I think we're about to find out." The basement was colder still. Water dripped from somewhere unseen, echoing through the space like a clock ticking in the dark. Their lights flickered across metal barrels stacked against the walls, most of them marked with radiation symbols. Some were split open, their contents long dried into strange crystalline patterns. Jaden's stomach nodded. "We shouldn't be breathing this," he said. Malik ignored him, focusing on a sealed hatch in the far corner. Unlike the rest of the room, it looked newer, the bolts barely corroded, the steel surface scratched but intact. The faint outline of letters was still visible on the metal. 12B access restricted. Malik knelt beside it, brushing away the dust. "This is the same code from the documents." Jaden aimed his light at it, shaking his head. "You think this goes to the underground site they mentioned?" "Only one way to find out," Malik said. He pulled a wrench from his backpack, the same one they'd used to open the hidden plate in the storage unit. The bolts resisted, groaning as he turned them. Jaden kept watch, glancing over his shoulder. Every creak of the building above made his pulse jump. After several minutes, Malik pried the hatch open. A blast of cold, stale air rushed upward, carrying a smell like wet stone and rusted metal. He aimed his flashlight into the opening. The beam revealed a narrow tunnel lined with reinforced concrete, descending at a steep angle. Moisture glistened on the walls. "This has been sealed for decades," Malik said. "No one's been down there." Jaden swallowed hard. "And maybe there's a reason for that." Malik didn't reply. He clipped the flashlight to his jacket and started down the steps. Jaden cursed under his breath and followed. The tunnel led into a larger chamber, half flooded and silent except for the steady drip of water. The beam of their flashlights danced across a network of pipes and cables, all of them dead, covered in rust. Against one wall, an old generator stood surrounded by a pool of stagnant water. The air felt wrong, too still, too heavy. Malik moved towards the center of the room, his boots splashing softly. There, half submerged, was a cylindrical container like the ones they'd seen in the footage. The markings were almost gone, but one symbol was still visible. A red triangle with 3 curved blades around a circle. He filmed everything. The camera whirred quietly, capturing the scene, the evidence that something terrible had once been buried here. Jaden approached the wall, brushing away grime until more letters appeared. Horizon 12B Disposal Chamber. His throat went dry. "They really did it," he whispered. "They buried the waste." As they explored, Malik noticed movement in the water, a faint ripple that spread outward in perfect circles. He froze, scanning the surface. "Did you see that?" Jaden shone his light where Malik pointed, but there was nothing. Only stillness. "Probably rats," Jaden said, though he didn't sound convinced. They didn't stay long after that. The deeper they went, the stronger the unease became. It wasn't just fear. It was the sense that they were trespassing somewhere sacred and poisonous, a place not meant for the living. When they finally climbed back to the surface, the air outside felt thin and sharp, the daylight blinding after the gloom below. Malik turned off the camera and exhaled shakily. "We have enough," he said. "This proves everything." But as they walked back to the truck, Jaden noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the mud near the gate, fresh tire tracks cut through the ground, deep and recent. He crouched down, touching the edges. "Someone else was here," he said. Malik frowned. "Maybe from years ago." Jaden shook his head. "No, look at this, it's still wet. We weren't the first ones to find this place." They loaded the gear into the truck, nerves fraying. Malik kept glancing in the mirrors as they drove away, half expecting headlights to appear behind them. The sun dipped lower, painting the ruins in dull amber light. The camera rested on Malik's lap, its tiny red light blinking. They had proof now. Images, recordings, documents, enough to expose something huge. But both brothers knew the truth carried a price. That night, back at the motel, Malik transferred the footage to his laptop. The video flickered, distorted by static, but the details were clear enough: the barrels, the markings, the submerged chamber. Jaden sat beside him, rubbing his temples. "We need to get this to someone who can handle it," he said. Malik nodded. "Tomorrow, we'll find a journalist or a lawyer, someone who won't just sell it." He paused, glancing toward the window. The parking lot outside was dark, but a shape moved briefly between the cars, a shadow gone as quickly as it appeared. "Jay," he said quietly, "I think we're being watched." Jaden stood, peering through the curtain. Nothing. Just rain starting again, the sound soft against the glass. "We'll leave early," he said, "before dawn." But Malik's expression didn't ease. He closed the laptop, locking the footage behind a password. "Whatever happens, we keep moving," he said. When the lights went out, Jaden lay awake, listening. The hum of the highway in the distance, the whisper of the rain, the steady rhythm of Malik's breathing beside him. Then, somewhere outside, a car engine turned over and idled. The sound lingered, low and patient, before fading into silence. Neither of them spoke of it in the morning. They packed quickly and left before sunrise, the motel fading in the mirrors. The road ahead stretched empty, the air thick with fog. Jaden drove while Malik reviewed the footage again on the small screen, frame by frame, making sure it was all still there. "We're going to need more than this," Malik said after a while. "People won't believe just some videos." Jaden nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then we find someone who will." But as the fog lifted and the pale light spread across the fields, both brothers felt it in their bones, the knowledge that once they had opened the ground and looked beneath that concrete, there was no turning back. They had found the truth. And now the truth was following them. By the time they reached the city again, the sky had taken on that strange copper hue that always appeared before rain. The air felt close, like a hand pressing down on everything, and the sound of the tires over wet asphalt filled the silence between them. Malik drove now, his jaw tight, his eyes flicking between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. Jaden sat with the camera in his lap, reviewing the footage one more time, though he'd already watched it half a dozen times since they left the site. Each time, the same unease crept into his chest. There was something wrong with the video, something he couldn't quite name. At certain points, the image seemed to distort in impossible ways, as though the air itself was bending around the shapes caught on film. He didn't mention it to Malik. His brother's mood was dark enough already. Since the discovery at the underground chamber, Malik had spoken little. His focus sharpened into something Jaden barely recognized. He had always been driven, always the one to take risks, but this was different. He looked like a man who had glimpsed something he couldn't forget, and was now being pulled toward it by a force stronger than reason. They didn't go home. Malik said it wasn't safe. They stopped instead at a small diner on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of coffee and fried onions, where the waitress didn't look twice at two men who hadn't slept in days. Jaden ordered eggs he didn't touch. Malik unfolded the map again on the table, tracing the lines with his finger. "There's more," he said quietly. The files mentioned a supervisor, someone who oversaw Horizon before it was shut down. A man named Arthur Lamb. His name was on the badge we found. Jaden looked up exhausted. "You think he's still alive?" Malik shrugged. "If he isn't, someone knows what happened to him, and if he is, he's the one who buried that chamber." The waitress brought their coffee and disappeared again. Malik opened his laptop, connecting to the diner's weak Wi-Fi. He searched for the name, Arthur L. Lamb, Clayton Defense Systems. There were results, but most were decades old. Old newspaper clippings, an obituary for a man of the same name who had lived in Augusta until the late 90s, and a few references to environmental hearings that had been sealed from public record. But one result stood out, a reference in a university archive database. A retired engineer, Arthur Leonard Lamb, had given a series of private lectures in 2005 about industrial ethics and containment policy. No recordings were available, but there was an address for correspondence. Jaden leaned closer. "You think it's really him?" Malik smiled grimly. "Only one way to find out." By noon, they were back on the highway. The rain came down in thin, slanting lines, streaking across the windshield like scratches. The address led them to a small town outside Macon, a place of narrow streets and sagging porches, where Spanish moss hung like old curtains from the trees. Malik parked near a post office and double-checked the address. It led to a single-story brick house at the end of a quiet street, half hidden behind overgrown hedges. The blinds were drawn, and the mailbox leaned crookedly on its post. Jaden frowned. "Doesn't look like anyone's lived here in years." Malik got out anyway. Maybe that's what we're supposed to think. They walked up the path. The porch creaked under their weight. Malik knocked twice. For a long moment there was nothing, no sound from inside, no movement behind the blinds. Then a shadow appeared through the glass. The door opened just enough for an old man's face to appear, pale, lined, his eyes sharp and wary. "Who sent you?" he asked. Malik hesitated. "We found something," he said carefully. "Something with your name on it. Project Horizon." The door closed immediately, the latch clicking from the inside. Jaden turned to Malik, whispering, "Nice job." But before they could leave, the door opened again. "Come in," the old man said. The air inside smelled of dust and paper. The walls were lined with shelves full of books and file boxes. The curtains were drawn, and the only light came from a small lamp on a cluttered desk. Arthur Lamb was older than they expected, well into his 80s perhaps, but his posture was straight, his movements precise. He gestured for them to sit. "You shouldn't have come here," he said. Malik set the camera on the table. "We found this under a storage unit in Atlanta. The files had your name, so did the badge. We thought you could tell us what it means." Lamb's expression tightened. "And you opened it?" "We had to," Malik said. "There were documents, tapes." Lamb raised a hand, cutting him off. "Then it's already started again." The brothers exchanged a glance. "Started what?" Jaden asked. The old man leaned back in his chair, his eyes distant. "Horizon wasn't a military project, not exactly. It began as an experiment in containment. Chemical, biological, and otherwise. We were supposed to build a new kind of storage system for hazardous waste, one that could neutralize it instead of simply burying it. The problem was, we didn't fully understand what we were creating." Malik frowned. "You're saying it was a science experiment?" Lamb nodded slowly. "A classified one. We used a compound that interacted with organic matter on a molecular level. It absorbed, transformed, and, well, consumed. Theoretically, it would have eliminated toxic runoff entirely. But something went wrong. The compound didn't stop reacting. It kept growing. It adapted. Jaden felt his stomach twist. "Are you saying that stuff is still alive down there?" Lamb's eyes met his. "Alive isn't the right word. Aware might be closer." The room felt suddenly smaller. Malik leaned forward. "Why bury it? Why not destroy it?" "We tried," Lamb said softly. "Every method we had. Heat, acid, isolation. Nothing worked. The more we tried to contain it, the stronger it became. The only solution was to seal the site permanently. So we buried it, and we buried the truth along with it." He paused, his hands trembling slightly. "That chamber you opened was one of several. Horizon 12B wasn't the only site." Malik's pulse quickened. "How many?" Lamb didn't answer at first. Then, in a low voice, he said, 5. Jaden stared at him. "And they're all still out there?" Lamb nodded. "Buried and forgotten, until you two decided to start digging." For a long moment, none of them spoke. The rain against the window was the only sound. Finally, Malik asked, "Who else knows?" Lamb looked toward the window, as though expecting to see someone there. The government dismantled Clayton Defense Systems after the accidents. The files were sealed, personnel relocated, but there were others, contractors, private investors, people with more money than conscience. When the official program shut down, they took what was left underground, literally and figuratively. They called it recovery research, but it was just another word for weaponization. Jaden felt cold all over. You're saying they turned it into a weapon? Lamb gave a hollow laugh. They tried, and they failed. The last group that went back to the site vanished without a trace. That was in '85. After that, I left. I thought it was over. Malik leaned forward. But it's not. We were followed. People have been watching us since we found those tapes. Lamb nodded grimly. Then they know what you have, and they won't let you keep it. Jaden exhaled, his pulse hammering in his ears. Then what do we do? Lamb stood slowly, crossing the room to a metal filing cabinet. He unlocked it with a small key from around his neck and withdrew a thick envelope. If you want to survive, he said, you need to take this and disappear. Malik hesitated. What's in it? Proof, Lamb said, and a map to the others, horizon sites 12C through 16. But if you go looking for them, you won't come back. He handed the envelope to Malik, his eyes full of something like pity. I'm giving you what's left of my conscience. Do with it what you will. Before they could ask more, a noise outside made them all freeze. The low crunch of tires on gravel, followed by the hum of an engine idling. Lamb moved quickly, shutting off the lamp. They found you, he whispered. Get out, through the back. Malik grabbed the envelope and camera while Jaden peered through the curtain. 2 black SUVs had stopped at the end of the street. The men who stepped out wore dark suits, their faces shadowed under the rain. Move, Lamb said urgently. There's a gate behind the shed. Go now. They didn't argue. They slipped through the back door as the front porch creaked under new footsteps. Malik turned once, catching a final glimpse of Lamb standing in the hallway, back straight, eyes steady. Then the door closed behind them. They ran through the overgrown yard, the rain soaking their clothes, their breath sharp and ragged. Behind them came the muffled sound of voices and the crash of breaking wood. They didn't look back until they were over the fence and into the trees. Then, faintly through the downpour, they heard a single gunshot. Jaden stopped dead. Malik! But Malik didn't stop running. Keep moving, he said, his voice hoarse. We can't help him now. They made it back to the truck and drove, lights off, until the town disappeared behind them. Neither spoke for a long time. The rain washed over the windshield in waves, blurring everything into streaks of gray. When Jaden finally looked over, Malik still held the envelope tight in his hands, the paper darkened by moisture. He died for this, Jaden said quietly. Malik nodded, eyes fixed on the road. Then we better make it worth something. Hours later, they stopped under an overpass on the outskirts of the city. The engine ticked softly as it cooled. Malik opened the envelope and spread its contents across the dashboard. There were photographs, aerial shots of industrial sites, geological surveys, letters marked top secret, and one map that showed 5 red X's scattered across the southern states. Each was labeled with a number and a single word: active. Jaden leaned back, exhaling shakily. 5 more, he said. And if what Lamb said is true? Malik folded the map carefully. Then we're sitting on the biggest cover-up in American history. They sat in silence, listening to the rain taper off. The city lights flickered faintly in the distance, a reminder of the world still turning, oblivious to what lay buried beneath it. Malek's reflection stared back at him from the windshield, tired, wet, and haunted. "We can't run from this," he said finally. "Not now." Jaden didn't answer. He stared at the envelope on the dash, then at the empty stretch of road ahead. Somewhere out there were 5 more graves filled with secrets, and somewhere behind them, men with no names were already on their trail. The storm passed, leaving the world quiet and cold. The Harpers started the engine again, the sound echoing under the concrete. The road ahead waited, endless and dark. And though neither said it aloud, both knew what they were chasing now was more than truth. It was something older, deeper, and far more dangerous. Something that had been waiting in the dark long before they ever decided to dig. The rain had ended hours ago, but the world still felt soaked, as if every sound was muffled by water. The brothers had driven through the night, heading north with no destination except distance. The map and papers Arthur Lamb had given them lay on the seat between them, sealed inside a plastic folder, and every few miles Malek would reach out and touch it, as if to make sure it was still real. The highway stretched empty and colorless ahead of them. Dawn came pale and uncertain, a thin gray light that revealed only the fog rising from the trees and the broken lines of asphalt vanishing into the horizon. Neither of them had slept. The shot they'd heard outside Lamb's house still echoed in their heads, and Jaden couldn't stop seeing the old man's eyes, resigned but defiant as he'd told them to run. The image wouldn't fade. Every time Jaden blinked, he saw that narrow hallway, the shadows moving behind the windows, the way the lamp had gone out a second before the gunfire. He gripped the wheel tighter. "We should have stayed," he said quietly. Malek didn't look up from the map. "And died for nothing?" No. He knew what he was doing. They crossed into the next county before stopping. Malek found a rest area off the main road, little more than a strip of cracked pavement surrounded by pine trees and vending machines that hadn't worked in years. They parked the truck under a half-dead oak and sat for a while without speaking. The air smelled of damp earth and old leaves. Jaden leaned back, closing his eyes. "You think they'll find his body?" Malek shrugged. "Maybe, but they won't find the files, not all of them." Jaden opened his eyes again. "What if they're tracking us?" "They are," Malek said simply, "but we're not easy to catch." He reached into the glove compartment and pulled out the burner phone they'd been using since the motel. It was dead. No signal, no battery life. He dropped it out the window. "We stay off the grid. Cash only, no calls, no cards. We lay low until we know who's coming." Jaden stared at his brother. There was something in Malek's voice, something colder, more deliberate than before. "You're acting like we're criminals." Malek gave a faint smile. "Maybe we are. We broke into a federal containment site, took classified material, and got a government scientist killed. What else would you call it?" Jaden said nothing. He stepped out of the truck and walked a few paces into the woods, letting the quiet wrap around him. The trees dripped with leftover rain, and mist curled low over the ground. For a moment, he wished he could disappear into it, leave behind the maps and secrets and ghosts. But then he thought of Lamb, and of the 5 red X's marked active on the map. He couldn't walk away from that. Not now. When he returned to the truck, Malek had unfolded the map again. The edges were worn, the paper soft from handling. "Look at this," he said. "Site 13C. It's not far from here, maybe an hour east. If the others are anything like 12B, there'll be traces. Waste, equipment, something we can document. Jaden shook his head. You want to go back into another one of those places? Did you forget what Lamb said? That stuff's alive. That's why we need proof, Malik replied. We show people what's really down there. Once it's public, they can't bury it again. Jaden wanted to argue, but he saw the look in Malik's eyes, the same mix of fear and conviction he'd seen the day they opened the floor in the storage unit. Once Malik decided something, he didn't turn back. Jaden sighed, rubbing his face. Fine. But we do it right this time. No surprises. They drove east on back roads, avoiding towns and highways. The land flattened out into open country, the sky widening above them until it felt like they were driving across an endless gray sea. Occasionally, they'd pass a farmhouse or a truck stop, but for the most part, it was just the two of them and the hum of the tires against the road. By late afternoon, they reached a stretch of dirt road that wasn't on the map. Malik slowed the truck and peered through the windshield. Here, he said. According to the coordinates, the next site should be less than a mile ahead. The road ended at a chain-link fence topped with rusted barbed wire. A faded sign hung crookedly from the gate. Property of Clayton Environmental. No trespassing. Beyond it, the land dipped into a valley overgrown with grass and scrub. A few metal structures poked up from the distance, the remains of what might once have been a refinery. The air carried the faint smell of ozone and decay. They cut the engine and sat listening. No wind, no birds, only the low hum of insects. Jaden felt a shiver crawl up his neck. It's too quiet, he said. Malik ignored him, pulling a pair of bolt cutters from the back. The chain snapped easily, the gate swinging open with a shriek. They hiked down the slope toward the ruins. The ground was uneven, soft in places where the soil had turned to mud. Rusted pipes jutted from the earth, half buried in the weeds. Malik filmed everything, his voice steady as he narrated, dates, coordinates, visible conditions. You think anyone's been here since it shut down? Jaden asked. Malik shook his head. No one who wanted to be found. They reached the base of the valley and stopped near a concrete platform that had cracked down the middle. Stenciled letters, barely visible under the grime, read 13C Disposal Access. Malik crouched and ran his fingers along the crack. Same construction as the last one, he murmured. They built them all the same way. He found a metal hatch buried beneath layers of debris and cleared it with his hands. Unlike the one in 12B, this one wasn't sealed. The bolts were missing, the edges pried open, as if someone had been there before them. Jaden's stomach twisted. Somebody already dug this up. Malik aimed his flashlight into the opening. The tunnel below was dark, the air rising from it damp and foul. Looks like it collapsed, he said, half-flooded. Jaden wanted to leave, every instinct screaming that they shouldn't go down. But Malik had already grabbed a rope from the truck and tied it around a metal post. We'll be quick, he said, just enough to see what's left. The descent was short but treacherous. The air grew colder, thicker. The beam of the flashlight caught on fragments of machinery, broken barrels, and water that shimmered oddly, like oil floating on the surface. The smell was unbearable, a mix of rust, mold, and something else, something metallic and wrong. Malik crouched near a half-submerged panel, brushing away grime until words appeared. Containment Integrity Failure, 1983. Jaden moved closer. This was 30 years ago. 37, Malik corrected softly. And whatever happened here, it wasn't an accident. Something splashed in the water behind them. They turned sharply, lights sweeping across the room. Nothing moved. But then Jaden saw it. a ripple spreading across the dark pool, slow and deliberate, as if something beneath had shifted. "We're done," he said, backing away. "Malik, we're done." Malik hesitated, staring at the water. "It's reacting," he whispered. "You see that? It's still active." "Malik," Jaden's voice cracked. "Let's go." This time, Malik listened. They climbed out quickly, the rope slick with moisture. As they reached the surface, Jaden turned and saw the water below quiver again, light reflecting in strange patterns like breath beneath glass. They didn't speak until they were back in the truck, doors locked, engine running. Jaden's hands shook as he lit a cigarette he didn't want. "Whatever that was, it's not dead." Malik nodded slowly. "That's why they killed Lamb. He knew it wasn't contained. She's still alive. Writes from D.C. under a pseudonym. If anyone can make this public, it's her." Jaden stared at him. "And you know this how?" "I've been reading," Malik said simply, "while you were asleep." He pulled out a folded piece of paper with an address scribbled in pencil. "She runs an independent site. No corporate ties, no government sponsors. I think Lamb trusted her once." Jaden exhaled slowly. "You're serious. As serious as it gets." They spent the next few hours making preparations. Malik destroyed the remaining phones and SIM cards, scattering the pieces into a ditch. Jaden siphoned the last of the gas from a rusted tractor to refill their tank. They drove, without speaking, the road winding between thick pine groves and empty fields until they found a small truck stop where they could blend in with the morning traffic. Malik bought a change of clothes for each of them from a thrift bin behind the diner. Neutral colors, nothing traceable. He paid in cash. By noon, they were on the interstate again, heading north. The sun burned through the clouds, washing the landscape in harsh light. Jaden drove while Malik sat beside him, laptop open, checking for signs that their story had already reached someone else. Every news site he tried seemed empty of anything connected to Horizon, as if the world itself refused to acknowledge what lay under its soil. "They scrubbed everything," he said, scrolling through blank results. "No records, no history, nothing." "That's what people like Lamb were for," Jaden said. "They buried the truth so deep no one would ever find it." "Until now," Malik replied. They reached Washington by nightfall. The city was wrapped in mist, the street lights casting halos in the wet air. Malik had arranged to meet Vanessa Lowell in an old diner on the edge of Arlington, a quiet place near the river where truckers and night shift workers came to eat in silence. They parked 2 blocks away and walked. Jaden's nerves buzzed like static under his skin. "You sure she's real?" he asked. Malik nodded. "If she isn't, we'll find someone else." Inside, the diner was almost empty. A waitress wiped down the counter while a radio hummed softly in the corner. Malik spotted a woman sitting in a booth near the back. She was older than he expected, her hair streaked with gray, a scarf pulled loosely around her neck. When she looked up and saw them, her expression didn't change. No surprise, no fear, just a quiet recognition that sent a chill down Jaden's spine. She gestured for them to sit. "You're late," she said. Her voice was calm, low, with the kind of authority that came from knowing too much. Malik sat across from her. "We had to take the long way." She studied them both, her gaze sharp but not unkind. "Lamb told me someone might come one day," she said. "Said he'd left a trail only the desperate would follow. You have something for me, don't you?" Malik opened the backpack and set the files on the table. "He said you could help." Lowell hesitated before reaching out. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened the envelope and pulled out the first page. When she saw the words, "Project Horizon, Site 12B," her breath caught. He kept it, she whispered. After all these years. She looked up, her eyes glinting in the dim light. You have no idea what this is going to do. Jaden leaned forward. Then you believe us? I was there, she said, not inside, but close enough to smell the fires. They told us it was an industrial spill, but I saw the trucks at night, the convoys heading south. I knew something wasn't right, but they killed the story before I could publish. Lamb disappeared a month later. Malik nodded. He didn't disappear. He hid until we found him. Her face darkened. And now he's dead. Jaden swallowed hard. They killed him the moment we left. Lowell closed her eyes briefly, then straightened. Then you'd better understand what you're walking into. Once this goes out, you won't just be chased, you'll be erased. These people don't make arrests, they make accidents. If I publish, it has to be airtight. Footage, documents, verification. Malik slid the camera across the table. Everything's on there. The chambers, the barrels, Lamb's confession. It's all real. She took it, holding it carefully like something fragile and sacred. I'll need time to process this, to confirm it. You don't have much, Jaden said. They're already after us. Lowell's expression softened. Then stay hidden. Leave the city. I'll contact you when it's safe. They exchanged numbers written on scraps of paper. No phones, no emails. Lowell promised to use a secure network, but even she looked uneasy. You did the right thing, bringing this to me, she said quietly. But you should know, truth doesn't save people like you. It destroys them. When they left the diner, the air outside had turned colder. The river glimmered faintly in the distance, and the city's lights reflected off the wet pavement. Jaden walked beside Malik in silence, both of them aware that something irreversible had just begun. They slept that night in a cheap motel near the highway, taking turns keeping watch. Every sound outside, a car door, a passing engine, footsteps in the hall, made Jaden reach for the knife under his pillow. Around dawn, Malik finally drifted into sleep, the lines of exhaustion etched deep into his face. Jaden sat by the window, watching the gray light creep across the room. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd done it. But by afternoon, hope began to fade. Lowell was supposed to call using a secure number, but the hours passed with no word. Malik paced the room, checking the window every few minutes. Maybe she's just verifying, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Jaden turned on the television, flipping through channels. Most were static or daytime talk shows, but then one headline caught his eye. Retired government scientist found dead in apparent fire, Macon, Georgia. The image showed Arthur Lamb's house, blackened and half collapsed. The report mentioned a gas leak, no signs of foul play. Jaden turned off the sound, staring at the screen. They cleaned it up, he said quietly, like he never existed. Malik sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. Then we're next. The knock came just before dusk, 3 sharp raps that froze the air in the room. Jaden's heart leapt. Malik motioned for silence, reaching for the knife. "Who is it?" he called. A voice answered through the door. "Vanessa Lowell." Jaden's stomach twisted. Malik opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked different, nervous, pale, her hair damp from rain. She stepped inside quickly, closing the door behind her. "They know," she said breathlessly. "I barely made it out. My apartment was ransacked. They were waiting for me." Jaden stood. "The files, did you upload them?" She nodded. "Half. The rest are encrypted on a secure drive, but once it's live, it can't be stopped." Malik's eyes widened. "Then it's done?" "Almost," she said, "but we need one more piece, the footage from 13C, the site you found after Lamb died. Without that, they'll call it fabrication." Jaden glanced at Malik. "It's still on the camera." "Then we get it online now," she said. They spent the next hour working in silence. Malik connected the drive to her laptop, the faint glow of the screen painting their faces blue. The upload bar crawled slowly forward. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, the air growing heavier by the minute. Jaden stood at the window, watching headlights flicker along the highway. "How long?" he asked. 10 minutes, Malik said, "maybe less." But before the upload could finish, the lights went out. The room plunged into darkness. Jaden's pulse spiked. "Malik?" Lowell grabbed the laptop. "Keep it running. Use the battery." The screen flickered back to life, but the signal indicator flashed red. Connection lost. Malik cursed under his breath. They cut the power. Outside, an engine idled. Then came the sound of footsteps. Jaden looked at Malik. "We need to move." Lowell clutched the drive. "If they get this, it's over." Malik opened the back window. "Go," he said. "Now." They climbed out into the rain-slick alley as headlights swept across the room behind them. Jaden heard the door crash open, voices shouting. He turned once to see a man in black aiming a flashlight into the room, the beam slicing through the dark. Then Malik pulled him toward the truck. They drove without lights through the storm, the road winding north again. The laptop sat open between them. The upload paused at 92%. Malik's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "If we can find a signal, we finish it," he said, "even if it kills us." They reached the ridge an hour before dawn. The rain had stopped, and the sky was a deep, bruised purple. Malik parked on the shoulder, climbing out with the laptop and the portable modem. He set it on the hood, fingers trembling as he reconnected the drive. The signal returned, weak but steady. 92 became 93, then 94. Jaden stood beside him, scanning the empty road. "They'll find us." "I know," Malik said, "but at least they'll know too." The sun was just breaking over the horizon when the upload hit 100%. The progress bar disappeared. A small window popped up. Transmission complete. Malik exhaled shakily, closing the lid. "It's out there now." Jaden looked toward the east where the first light touched the clouds. "You think anyone will believe it?" Malik smiled faintly. "They don't have to. They just have to see it." In the distance, sirens wailed, faint, growing louder. Malik turned the key and the engine roared to life. They drove into the rising sun, the wind carrying the smell of rain and metal and something electric, something that felt like change. Behind them, in newsrooms and servers across the world, the files of Project Horizon began to appear. Videos of the chambers, the waste, the confessions of a dying man who had spent half a century hiding the truth. Screens lit up, headlines formed, and for the first time, the buried voices of the dead began to speak. As the Harper's truck disappeared down the long curve of the highway, Jaden glanced back once more at the world waking behind them, unsure whether they had saved it or doomed it. Malik kept his eyes forward, his hands steady on the wheel. "We did what we had to," he said. And somewhere, far beneath the ground, in the ruins of Site 12B, the earth trembled, just once, faintly, like something alive shifting in its sleep. If this story kept you on the edge till the end, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss what happens next. Check out the other shocking stories on this channel and share this video with someone who needs to see the truth.